Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Fire Emblem, Crimson Flower in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 46, A Festival's Fast Approach. Now time was quickly approaching. Only a few days remained. Lining up as usual, Dorothea felt herself cowering before the looming horizon of her potential failure. Despite being the dawn of an early Sunday morning, Linhard, too, had also attended. For once, he was early. "Best of luck to you, I suppose," he said, this time not even giving so much as a yawn. "Thanks, I'll try," she said, still alarmed by the situation. "Is Bernadette not going to cheer you on?" "No. I asked her to sleep in this morning. She'd been offering to help for a while, and I didn't want to burn her out for an exam she wasn't even aiming to do." "Smart," Linhard acknowledged. "She'll be meeting me in the canteen after this is over. She said she'd treat me, but I suppose her being outside for once is already a treat." Dorothea smiled briefly, realizing the support she was being given, and what lengths it was coming from. "I suppose I'll cordially invite myself in, then," Linhard said. "No matter how much you doubt yourself, I suppose it is nice to acknowledge that you changed one life, at least. Do you feel proud of it being from someone of nobility, though? You always ask the hardest questions." "I would never hate Bern, far from it." "Because you don't see her as a noble at all." Linhard guessed, to which the reaction he got suggested he was correct. "If it brings you solace, nobody in this academy is truly in the right. There never was a right to begin with, in fact. Your hatred for the nobility is deeply rooted, and it's largely why I choose not to argue with you. Don't fret over such a matter of vague alignment." "Thank you. Consider this, though, not every one of us is so bad. Take Ferdinand, for example. Bad example?" Dorothea interrupted, now showing annoyance. She had finally been getting used to Linhard's more confusing qualities, but this was an off occasion he had crossed the line. "I won't forgive Ferdinand for his condescension for as long as I live." "Is that so?" He stopped talking now. Linhard had much more to say, but he knew it was not right to talk at this moment. He sighed. "I shan't meddle in your affairs, then. Best of luck for today's test, then." "You too," Dorothea responded, now in a calmed state. "If you find the exam difficult, then don't follow me to the mess hall. Me and Bern are celebrating after all my hard work, so it wouldn't be right to have someone who lazes around all day being there." "I understand," Linhard shook his head, disapprovingly. "If I happen to find this exam easier than last time, then let that be a testament to how much I tried to correct my early mistakes, then." "Sounds good." Coming out from her peaceful nap, emerged Belette. Her hair had been messy from a lack of preparation, and so too was her clothing mishandled. She had forgotten to put on her usual breastplate for protection, and had instead opted for her plain black shirt. This, being right next to her orderly and well-prepped brother, did little to set her up as any more organized than him. "Good luck, guys." She yawned, waving haphazardly to the class. "You do know that Seath will be overseeing the exam, sister?" Byleth asked. "He may well see you in that attire." "Ah, crap!" she squealed, now awake. "I still need to make a good impression for our funding, though." It was too late, the door had opened to the classroom. Dorothea and Linhard's names were called upon. They thanked their professors for coming to see them off amidst the early morning. As they entered, Seath took a glance at Belette. "Did you not want a redemption from our earlier first impressions, Professor?" he asked, slightly jokingly. However, the rest of his comment had been spent in annoyance. "Yeah, cut me some slack today, please." "I shall try, but do not count your blessings." As the door closed, Byleth and Suthies observed a deeply shook Belette. She was upset initially, but decided to perk up as much as she could for the situation at present. In the room right now, were her two most troubled students. This was not about her, or her brother, or even her entire class, but about Dorothea and Linhard only. "Kick some ass, you two," she smiled. "Because of you, we could not bid them farewell for a good amount of time," Byleth scolded. However, this fact had completely flown past his sister. "I'm gonna go get some breakfast." We'll check on those two later, yeah. Provided you can make it. Suthies joked, amused. The morning had passed. The students exited their room. Happily meeting their friend in the mess hall, the three happily ate together, forging their bonds in the process. Elsewhere, their perked professor had set aside her own time for a plan of her own. Meeting with Flane, she introduced her to a special tea brand that was sold in the marketplace. After brewing it in the staff room, they whisked themselves away, finding a nice spot in the campus away from the classrooms. It was a spot heavily furbished in nature and scenic seating. Taking in their surroundings, they sat. Perfect place. Billette beamed. She brought with her 2 pieces of clipped paper. Looking at it, Flane was shocked. What might those be? Glad you asked, tiny one. She showed her a question, however, used the rest of her arm to cover any piece of writing so as not to expose her students' work. These are the exams that some of my students did early this morning. I'm meant to mark them before Seath looks over them. Ah, I see. At this information, Flane felt some guilt approaching her. Usually, brother does not look over those sheets. My apologies for this suspicion. Ah, I suppose it's just a battle I'll have to fight, then, eh? She joked. I'll play by his rules for a bit. Some good might come of it after. You can try, however I doubt you will be successful. Billette had not told Flane of her last interactions with Seath. Wanting to keep it a surprise, she marked her students' works with the very hope that they would pass. If that were the case, her affinity with Seath would further increase as a result. She had not sipped her tea just yet. Readily engaging with the paper, she found herself invigorated by their answers. A few mistakes were made from their last attempts, but these repeats had been vastly overshadowed by the emergence of newer and cleaner answers. Finally finishing her work, she settled the papers aside, carefully tidying them away so as not to leave tea markings on them. Smiling at her drink, she sipped, only to tense away in shock. Gah! Lukewarm. Flane laughed. Hey, it's not funny. I was looking forward to that. You were asking for it, Professor. I warned you. I know, she sighed, unable to do anything about it. Accepting her situation, she continued drinking her tea. Anyways, now that your attention is only on me now, I suppose it is only right to make small talk. Billette nodded, clumsily slipping some of her drink in the process. Flane was at first put off by this behavior, but forgave it coming from her friend. I have heard that you managed to get permission from my brother and Rhea to guard the Holy Mausoleum. I don't know how brother pulled it off, Billette admitted, but he did. I guess that's the important part. Do you really think that our enemies would go as far as to venture inside? Brother does, and Edelgard, and Linhard. Billette admitted. They'll explain why to us all later in class. How do you yourself not know? Did Rhea not want you to join in? Flane asked, shocked. A face of concern was growing, however Billette smiled it off. She didn't want me to join them. I can't remember her excuse, but she thought brother was more suited to help Edelgard and Linhard. I suppose him being smarter than me made her like him more, she suggested, now finishing her drink. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. It just means less work being sent my way. I suppose that is correct. Flane wanted to further question this behavior, but also did not want to risk the chances of hurting her friend. She thought about leaving the matter aside for today. What are your plans after the festival? She asked. Usually I am free all day, however brother wants me alongside him as it takes place this month. Fishing, Billette answered. You're joining. You don't have much of a choice. Is this another hostage situation? Flane joked, laughing. You bet. Secretly, she had already gotten such permission from Seath to do such activities. It took a lot of effort on her part, but with the promise to protect her from a wet fall, she was given the specific freedom for Flane to accompany her. For now, Billette wanted to disguise it as part of a rebellious act. At least for now, anyway. Later on, she intended to speak the whole truth to her friend. Billette, I must warn you before the day arrives, but there have been rumors of a Reaper going around the academy grounds, Flane warned. I do not often take heed to rumors, but even the students are talking of it, and some say that they may be targeting the festival grounds, too. Billette showed a concerned face when hearing this. She inquired further about it, and Flame continued. They say at the peak of night, a reaper has been sighted in the academy, swiping up victims as it passes them. It is all hearsay, but I beg of you to stay cautious, for me. In her mind, she had a hard time believing her words, but she also saw the concerned face of her friend. Smiling, she decided to give assurance. Don't worry about us. Me and brother love our class. We're gonna get in and get out without any mishaps. I assure you. Thinking back on this morning's events, she smiled. They've been working hard. I know they're more than ready to take this month on. I can only take your word for it. She finished her tea at this moment. Looking at her friend suspiciously, Billette whispered. You are actually taking my word for it, right? Of course. Oh, good. Billette breathed a sigh of relief. Too much of the faculty here thinks I've got bricks for brains. I'm glad someone outside of the students trusts me. Flame, once again, disapproved of her behavior, but had again chosen to stay silent. One of these days, I need to get you into our class. Billette said. Flame shook herself in surprise a little, this time astonished with such a heinous passing thought. Excuse me. You heard me. Billette said. I'll get you into my class somehow. As on par with her usual trademark, she showcased her earnest smile towards Flame. Whether it's this year, next year, or 1,000 years from now, I'll figure out some way to get you in. You seem envious of the students, so it's worth a shot. But how will you convince my brother? Flame asked, worried. Complete luck, and a whole lot of patience, Billette answered. I don't know the exact method, either, but I'll try. She fell silent slightly. Thinking back on past childhood memories, she looked at the table. Finally poking her head at her friend's smile, she mumbled. You make too many promises, you know. I do, but I never intend on going back on a single one of them, you know. Are you sure? Flame asked. Yes, I'm sure. This time, Flame smiled. It always happened. Billette found many ways of unlocking hope within her, and so too had she found ways to promise her a newfound freedom. If there was ever a force she thought that could combat her brother before Billette, then she can't have imagined they would be any more useful. Returning her smile, Flame as well, had finished her tea. Lukewarm. She spat, having now sipped it in a while. You're telling me, Billette acknowledged. The two laughed. Returning to his dorm room, Linhard was looking forward now to the rest of what his day had to offer. Whilst initially scared, Bernadetta had let him stay in the mess hall with Dorothea. Even though it was far from her comfort zone, she very reluctantly accepted his presence. Still, her discomfort to fully communicate with him was always something Linhard had found amusing. As he looked towards the seemingly empty dorm hallway, he noticed a figure at the back. He edged closer, seeing a familiar face. Are you returning to your usual studies? Edelgard asked, propping herself away from the wall. Yes, he replied. You here to nag me, or perhaps apologize? No, Edelgard answered. I'm here to wish for you to enjoy your time away from work. She now walked off, closing the door behind her at the end of the hall. Linhard, whilst he too was an enigmatic individual, was completely floored with thoughts. You're saying she waited however long for me just to wish for my enjoyment? He thought aloud to himself. I guess I should count my blessings that it's not another guilt trip, but neither was she apologizing either. He was still perplexed, but he decided to leave it at that. Opening his door, he would then proceed to spend the night, completely uninterrupted, practicing doing what he loved most. In the oncoming festival that was approaching, more than one life would be forever changed. There was one final batch of days that gave solace for each of the students to enjoy. After which, their most formidable of physical fights would approach them. Indeed, the Rite of Rebirth festival was soon approaching. What happened next would impact the students' lives for the rest of the story. Chapter 47, Discussions of Ambitions. The day finally arrived. Despite it not even being early morning yet, the first of the Rite of Rebirth's visitors had already found themselves crowding in front of the gates of the monastery. Just as Rhea had foretold in the assembly weeks ago, it was a moment long anticipated. All forms of vendors for food and goods were allowed in. They set their stalls aside, proudly displaying it for the public to come. The Knights of Sirios were already on patrol. Only the best of the elite were guarding the Archbishop, being those of Catherine and Shamir. Seath overlooked his assigned troops, giving each unit their designated orders on travel plans and inspection criteria. They listened readily, slowly spreading themselves around the monastery and neighboring town. As the day passed, the students awoke. No fun was to be had on this duration of days. They could spend their next set of days ogling at the possibility of enjoyment, but sooner or later, their professors had taken them out of their trances. They were next to appear within the monastery, each having been relocated to their assigned places of interest to guard. Still, just as she was told days and weeks ago, she was among the first to properly inch herself within the crowd, eagerly waiting for the monastery gates to open. She had been told time after time about their potential appearance. Just this once, she didn't want to miss them. "You sure the Ashen Demon's gonna be here, Arvel?" "Absolutely certain," their partner replied, however a member of the crowd beside them had completely phased through him without notice. "It's kind of hard to take you seriously when you're being passed through over and over, you know. You're going to have to take my word for it, regardless." He was slightly annoyed, but Arvel still wanted to make his point clear. "I think the Ashen Demon's going to be here. We couldn't find them anywhere else, and those rumors about what happened at the Red Canyon and Magdridway definitely ring bells for us. If it's anything like that battle from months prior, then that's the Ashen Demon." It was hard for Shay to focus. As much as she tried clinging to her friend's words, her shoulders were being huddled and tossed around from the crowd around her. "Whatever you say, but how are we gonna find them in this crowd? They should already be in the building within, yes." Arvel theorized, "We just need to find them in there. We'll only make true progress once those gates open." "Ugh," Shay groaned. "This isn't gonna be fun. I can tell that much." "You can do it, partner. You're not the one being squished to Fodlan's ends and back." A bell rang aloud. Everyone murmuring besides the duo looked above. As cheers and cries of excitement began to sound around them, a broad man had walked up to the gates. He inspected the eager patch of people, before walking back, out of the entrance and marketplace, towards a wider pathway of the inner monastery. Giving the command, the gates finally opened. Shay felt herself being pushed harder aside now. She tried her best to grapple with herself, whilst Arvel watched from above, but it was little use. Falling aside, she muttered curses to herself before properly looking up. The man from before, a man of broad figure and scarred face, walked to her, kneeling down to help her. "Kid, you all right?" The question was appreciated. Wanting not to act weakened, Shay brushed herself aside, getting up on her own merits. "Not my finest day, but I'm good now, thanks." She looked around, noticing the entrance was still crowded, but less congested. Breathing a sigh of relief, she looked up at the man once more. "I appreciate the gesture." "You're welcome. It gets hard to organize such large traffic during this time of year, so it helps to minimize casualties when we can. Please call for me whenever you need help. I'm the captain around these parts." "Neat," Shay commented. As she decided to walk off, she was suddenly stopped. Looking to her shoulder, she noticed an unexpectedly tight grip on her left. You said I could go now. What are you planning to do with that sword on your waist?" "Crap," Shay muttered to herself, already having been caught before the act. Arvel had a look of anxiety on him. She had to play it cool. She did not want to get caught just yet. I usually carry it around for safety." "I'm sorry. I didn't know I wasn't allowed." In realization, the captain reverted his serious face, now putting his hand on his forehead in disarray. He put out a long sigh as he spoke. "It's an honest mistake, don't worry about it. Are you all right, sir?" "Hey," Arvel cried. "We can't go around helping people and offering sympathy. We need to find the Ashen Demon." Shay ignored him, now realizing something must have been at large threatening the festival if the captain of such an astute event had such a look on his face. Listen, I know I'm not exactly the most reliable of sources, but I'm also a traveling merc round these parts. My help's available, if you're needing it. The captain looked at Shay, then at the floor in frustration. Giving up on himself, he faced Shay again. I suppose it's better I swallow my pride in times like these. What's your name, kid? Shay, and you? She was about to introduce Arvel, but quickly stopped herself before she could reveal her secret. It was not as if he was noticeable to the naked eye, anyway. Geralt, he revealed. Shay and Arvel steadied themselves at this response, suddenly feeling hostility embroil their thoughts. And thanks. Can you afford to follow me? I'll fill you in on the details as we walk. Any treats on me, and I'll compensate you later. Are you kidding me? Arvel cried, clearly agitated. He's the very ally of our enemy. Are you seriously going to help him? Shay followed Geralt, now whispering to Arvel as they walked. Pipe down. If we get in his good books, it might help us find the Ashen Demon more easily for later. Arvel gave this sentiment some thought. He was more than annoyed, but just this once, he found himself reluctantly agreeing with his vessel. Just don't go doing anything you'll regret. Sighing to himself, Arvel followed after the two, still reluctant to do anything more. This isn't how I expected things to go. Still, I suppose we could say this is a form of progress after all. Elsewhere, other happenings were about to ensue. Each student in the Black Eagles woke up, and without delay, lined up in their class, combat ready for what the day would bring. The twins, expectedly, checked each and every one of them to secure they were safely present. Thank you, everyone, for your cooperation these past few weeks, Byleth announced. It has not been easy. We have been truly tested and tried into a bizarre circumstance, and each and every one of us have had to endure various new tribulations as a result. Still, Sister is proud of you, and I myself think that all of you have come a long way. As Byleth said this, he noticed smiles grow from one face to another. Even Billette had displayed giddy behavior, as she continued cheering on and hyping the class. Today will be a difficult battle, as it has always been. I firmly believe that you will make it. I have told Sister, myself, and even Archbishop Rhea of my placed trust in you. We will overcome today, and we will do it swiftly. Of all the confirmations I have given in life, this is my greatest one of all. Immediately, the students felt motivated. They talked amongst themselves now. Some were nervous, whilst others were incredibly ready. Byleth's words had an impact. Even he could tell. Good, Suthies remarked. You said what I wanted you to say in the correct form. Are you understanding how your words can value emotions? Not exactly, Byleth answered, truthfully. But I can at least see how this will benefit us in battle. This is something I am sure of. I shall take what I can get with that remark, Suthies shrugged. It was difficult to think of, but just a few months ago, Byleth saying this sort of response would have angered Suthies at any moment. This time, she had expected such arguments. Billette, will you be making that announcement now? Billette walked to her brother, replying to Suthies' question, I don't see why not. Looking to everyone, she clapped her hands together. They looked confused, but silenced. We also have a special announcement today. Fingers crossed, this is a good morale boost, but I'm certain our special someones will be super happy today. What's up, Teach? Casper asked, confused. What's up, is that no one here is gonna feel down. Believe it or not, we're now all at the same level that's expected of us, and I couldn't be prouder as a professor of this class. Taking both her arms, she pointed them in various directions, to the students who mattered. Linhard, Dorothea, come on up. You're about to be publicly mentioned in front of everyone, by courtesy of me. The two students, whilst differing in motivation for today, had been eyeing one another with uncertainty. As Linhard moaned about going up, Bernadetta whispered to her friend's ear. I'm glad it's not me that's going up there, she sighed a breath of sweet relief. Thank goodness. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Bern, Dorothea joked. I didn't mean it like that dash. Yeah, I know. Dorothea, Ferdinand now interrupted. She caught the two in surprise. I am sorry for intruding, but I also wanted to say that Professor Ballet has never been a liar. I believe you will come out a better person after approaching her, so do what your heart is truly telling you to do, and be brave. She stammered. Even Bernadetta had been taken aback at this wording. Composing herself, Dorothea did as she wanted, and responded. Thanks. Ferdy. I honestly didn't expect those words to come out of your mouth. I can understand that much, he admitted, guiltily. But I have forever wanted to fix the boundaries between us. I shall never understand why, but I want you to no longer keep hostilities towards me, so I will be trying to do my part to help you. I appreciate the sentiment, thanks. Thinking more on his words, Dorothea tensed slightly at his wishes. Have you figured out why I dislike you yet? You told me. I was like a bee, he recalled, but shook his head in defeat. No, I do not still understand why I am so. I hope for your sake that you get there eventually. For the first time, Dorothea smiled at Ferdinand. I hate you, Ferdinand. That's the simple truth, but I know you're in the middle of redeeming yourself, so I hope, for my own sake, you can prove me wrong. I will try my best. Just as always, he showcased his usual, proud self. I'll make it my duty as a noble to try my best. I'm certain of it. Dorothea chose to ignore that last comment. Finally facing her fear of walking towards the view of the entire class, she steadied herself. Smiling at her friend only, she then looked back at Ballet, who had been waiting beyond patiently for her arrival. When noticing her head facing her direction, Ballet reached her hand out towards Dorothea's direction. You ready to brave public viewing? Not exactly, but I'll try to, she responded. Now, she walked, finally grabbing onto her professor's hand. Finally giddy from this response, Ballet quickly ran back, rummaging through the front desk of the class. As she muttered to herself, her hands continued rummaging past anything of lesser importance. Now, she found it. Bringing out two hard pieces of paper, she jogged back to Linhard and Dorothea. For you two, she added. Since it's unfair that everyone else has these. Go kick ass with them, you hear me? It felt great to finally see it so in her hands. Dorothea was shocked. Thank you, Professor, was all she could mouth at this moment. I'm grateful, too. You've saved me some hassle. In a moment of smugness, Linhard turned back to his class, now addressing the one house leader in front. I suppose we have no need for retakes. Isn't that right, Edelgard? The class now realized what this meant. Now finally piecing together the certificates that the two had gotten, they all cheered in triumph. Finally, Dorothea and Linhard had made their way towards the monk class. They were one step closer to their goal of graduating, and they were stronger for it. Dorothea, Bernadetta now ran to her friend. You really did it. I'm so happy for you. A smile appeared from her friend's face. In a moment of bliss, all that had been done prior had suddenly become worth it for Dorothea. I am happy for you both. Petra now walked to the two as well. I am surprised, but happy. You and me both, Petra, Edelgard remarked. She tried her best to give Linhard a sincere smile, but only a face of surprise could be returned to her from his side. The rest of the class joined in as well, now crowding around the two, sharing their own pieces of praise for the duo. At this moment, their victory had been acknowledged. When looking at the pleased face of Linhard, Dorothea smiled to herself. It was not just her who had won this day, but she was happy for the both of them. They look so happy. Suthies now floated beside the twins. Is it not pleasant? We have our work cut out for us today, so I, admittedly, can't share that feeling with them. Ballet clenched her hands, motioning it towards her chest. Still, this feeling that I have, I couldn't be more happier for them. I'd want this feeling 100 times over if I could ever get it again. I can understand why, Suthies agreed. During their time spent staring, Byleth took this moment to properly survey everyone present. After a thorough glance, he motioned for his sister to interrupt. Roger, brother, she followed. Guys, I know it's a buzzkill, but we still have our mission today. The class now quit. But we also have our grand picnic later, so let's just get through today alive, okay? Their faces lit back up, but the silence had still stayed. Alright, I got their morale high and distractions low. You're up next, Billette tapped the shoulder of her brother. As she walked back, she began fiddling with the weapons tucked at the corner of the classroom, slowly now distributing them to everyone available. As told before, we have managed to secure permission to guard the Holy Mausoleum, as we informed Archbishop Rhea that it is where we believe that the intruders will align themselves towards on this day. This place is usually off limits for normal personnel during off hours, so we have been given rules to follow regarding today's mission, which I want all of you to listen and abide by. That goes to you as well, Linhard. The class turned to Billette, who had interrupted her brother at his highest command. Sorry. I just thought stating the obvious would help a little. You are forgiven, Byleth acknowledged, now turning back to the class. There is to be absolutely no touching of the artifacts in the room. Any belongings broken will be pardoned, so long as I can give the Archbishop proper reasoning. We will station ourselves accordingly, with a frontal and rear-end guard formation, and I will personally be assigning you with different jobs. In the event that an intruder is able to enter, you are permitted to kill. By now, Byleth had been routinely told by his sister and Suthies that some of the class were less than thrilled to be taking lives. Out of respect, he paused before continuing to allow the students to process this information. Now, we arrive on the matter of the efforts from outside that will be assisting us. I have talked with both Shamir and Catherine at length. They will both be on guard, occasionally checking on us. In the event we are in the midst of battle, they will be armed and ready so that they can assist us. They have informed me they are trusting of our capabilities, however, so it should be noted that they may not always arrive, if the festival outside is too busy. It was at this point that Billette had handed everyone their desired weapons. Out of kindness, she whispered to both Dorothea and Linhard to ask for their certificates back. I'll run to your dorms and slip them beneath your doors. You two can continue on in here. They followed her suggestion, watching her run out in a hurry. Finally announcing the objective for their current mission, Byleth now needed confirmation before moving towards the next step. Is that all understood? Yes, Professor, the class chanted back. Good, then let us move ahead. It was everything they described it being. A large room, 2 grand staircases, giant pillars holding it all together, and an array of treasured belongings, all lined up towards the very right and left of the mausoleum out of respect and remembrance. As it was such a vast space, both twins took a longer duration of time than they had originally anticipated when assigning duties. Towards the front, Byleth conversed with the house leader in regards to the situation. When he told her of her role, she made sure to check back for confirmation. And I am the only one out of the students allowed to move as I please. Edelgard asked this out of curiosity, to which a nod was given to her. You can maneuver as you wish. Should things go awry, I will be needing you to communicate with us. He looked upwards at the grand array of stairs before them, before finally turning back to Edelgard. This room is large. Communication is difficult, and the 2 layers of flooring above us makes it difficult to check for our surroundings. If put under the strain of battle, we can only hope that those away from us are holding their own. I do not want them all breaking formation, lest they be harder to command. Who else will be our communicators? Only you, me, and sister, Byleth answered. I would like for you to stay here, alongside Petra. From above, we have stationed Casper, Linhard, and Ferdinand to guard the middle flooring, and our ranged fighters, Bernadetta, Dorothea, and Hubert, to take care of our further corner. What's your reasoning for putting Linhard in the middle? Would the sight of blood put him off if battle arose? He is the only healer we can afford as of yet. Byleth looked towards the stairs, thinking to himself. The class may have only just progressed their efforts, but many in the group still had a long way to go. Try as we might, Hubert refuses to study in faith, and Dorothea has struggled with it in every attempt given. We are weakened in regards to support, but I am hoping our offensive formation can withstand that weakness of ours. I see. By now, Edelgard had understood everything that was to happen. Whilst the tense situation was now beginning to dawn on her as to the high severity of this mission, she tried her best to keep her worries towards the furthest reaches of her mind. If she was this apprehensive right now, then she could only imagine how the others in the class were feeling. Further in the back, Billette had already returned and regrouped with the class. She first checked the rear group, wanting to talk with the more apprehensive fighters first. As expected, Hubert was more than happy to have been tucked in the back, however he became agitated when told that Edelgard would be situated away from his safety. Billette first checked on him first, as by this point, Bernadetta and Dorothea were busy consoling one another beside them. "I can only hope that you have the right mindset with this mission," Hubert scoffed. "It's brother, so I trust him." Billette now looked towards Hubert. He was ready as he could ever be, looking downwards to check for his allies. When noticing the stare being given to him, he turned back to Billette, expecting her to keep talking. "Hubert, you hate us. Don't you?" "I do." When saying this, the other students in the rear guard turned around out of interest. "And it will be long before I let it go." "Why do you ask now, though?" "I had a hunch is all," Billette answered. She sat down on one of the stairs, idling with her fingers, before finally reaching for her sword. "Being a mercenary before, we've annoyed a lot of people. I don't know how many grudges are held against us, but I also know I can't do much to stop it." "Professor, do you wish you could?" Dorothea now asked this, approaching the two in the midst of their conversation. "I'd give anything and everything to get rid of all the hate in this world. It's been my life's mission. It's a lot, but I want to get started on it. I want to make it so that no one has to suffer the dread that comes through consequences, so everyone can be happy. Such a lofty ambition can only get you so far." Hubert had now lost interest after saying this. He returned to his post, leaving only Billette and Dorothea behind. "It's funny," she smiled. "The more realistic mercs back in our group told me that all the time. They always said to get over it, and it wasn't possible. I still like to think it is. Becoming a professor here has made me find hope in that theory." "That's your reason for teaching us?" Dorothea asked. "It wasn't originally. I thought it would just be a bit of fun, you know." Thoughts of the battle in the Red Canyon and Lonato flashed through her mind. The efforts displayed by her class made her proud, even if she was hasty in her own commands. "I figured this month, after talking with a friend of mine, and even Seath, that maybe trying my best here could reawaken that dream. I want to help everyone that steps into our class, regardless of their opinion of me." She wanted to tell her professor the honest truth. She wanted to tell her of all her own struggles, broken ambitions, and disappointments, and how not even the greatest of efforts could never bear fruitful results unless you got lucky, but looking at the solemn face of Billette had made Dorothea hesitant. She tried her best to steady her thoughts, organizing them properly before moving forward. When she finally readied her hand to tell her of her doubts, she was interrupted. A voice came from behind, surprising the two. "That's beautiful, Professor." Turning back, she saw Bernadetta. She had been watching the conversation this entire time, but had not yet said a word. Standing up now, Billette brought the two girls together, hugging them for a brief moment. "Thank you, you two. I'm glad I can have people who believe me now in my life. You two, Flane, Seath, and almost everyone in this class. Just one of you is all I need in this world." Letting go now, she slowly began walking down the stairs. "Anyways," she awkwardly scrambled. "I need to check on the others. You guys ready your weapons and stick to being on standby." "Capic." "Yeah," Dorothea answered, hesitantly. As she walked away, she turned back to her friend, who was still in admiration of their professor. Her face's side profile said it all. Bernadetta was momentarily entranced. For a brief few moments, nothing could distract her. "She's amazing, isn't she?" "Yeah," she answered once more. What she truly wanted to say was the exact opposite. The one who was truly inspiring was her friend. With just those simple words, she kept their hopeful professor in high spirits, bringing positivity that she could have never brought if she was by herself. Bernadetta was always alone. She always kept to herself, and never looked for attention. In truth, if she had been given opportunities like this, where she spoke, found time to herself, and focused her thoughts, she would bloom like the very flower that Dorothea had always aspired to be. To her, she was incredible, but Dorothea was not jealous of it. She was envious, but not jealous. She remembered now of her attempts in studying for her exams. It was a long struggle, but she pulled through. Thinking back on it, she wondered. Had she never had any support from her friend, would she have garnered these same results? The very thought scared her. Linhard was less than pleased to have been in the middle, but unlike the other more worried students, Billet could not help but laugh at his groans of annoyance. Ferdinand and Caspar were unlike him. They were ready. They were also hasty, but still ready. Big opportunity for making your names known today, huh? Billet gave a sly smile at both prepared nobles in the group. I'll be cheering you on. On the contrary, Professor, Ferdinand defended himself. Being a noble has its merits, but doing thankless acts for the very sake of undeserved clout is horrid in a team effort. I will admit to achieving my prior accomplishments to strengthen my name, but I cannot sully the class efforts on this day. Speak for yourself. When Caspar said this, a laugh came from Billet. My older brother's gonna be leading my family, anyway. If I can make myself known early here, then it'll help after I graduate. Billet became curious upon hearing this. So the younger siblings don't get much in higher-up families? Is that right? It's complicated. Caspar's voice trailed off as he said this. Don't get me wrong, I love them all, but I need to be me to show that I'm me. You get what I'm saying? Not a clue, Linhard answered. I getcha. Billet shot back, continuing the conversation. They've given me some trouble because of our family name, you know. He thought back to his time with Petra, and their difficulties in communicating the past month. Had their fathers not been locked in a deadlock battle all those years ago, he would be a lot further with her than he ever was now. But still, I'll make it, and I'll show em. That is, noble, Ferdinand said, now fully inspired. You have my full support, Caspar. Frankly, it makes me feel selfish today, as I had wanted an opportunity to prove myself as on par with Edelgard. Oh, wasn't this a team effort? Billet was taken aback, but still used it as a time to jest. I have dual ambitions. Ferdinand now looked away in guilt, causing another chuckle from the more vocal voices in the group. Of course you do. As Billet now finished the conversation, she did as she was originally told. Checking the weapons of her students, then looking at her own, she knew that now everyone was ready. As she aligned them in the appropriate formation, she herself went to the very middle. Her brother gave her full authority to move about, and so too had he allowed for her to give commands. This time, she wanted to ensure she could do well. Her first failure was known only to her, but it stuck with her during the events of the Red Canyon. Her second failure was excused and forgiven already by many after Lonato's passing, but it too had been one that caused frustration. Now, she wanted this possible success to carve out a new path for her name. Realizing now why she asked Caspar and Ferdinand these questions, she noticed it was for her own sake as well. Turning back, she looked at Linhard, who had not needed any commands to return to his post. She smiled at him, but he could only give a glum glance back. As she turned around, Edelgard came running to her. She was tired, breathless from the stairs, but she continued running past Billet. As she passed, the few words she said had set Billet's instincts on an immediate defensive formation. The enemy is here. Watch out for the oncoming mist. They have mages. Just as she said, a great fog had overtaken the mausoleum. It came from the lower levels, but quickly swarmed the premises. Billet swayed her hands around, trying to rid her area of it, but it did not budge. This was exactly like what happened last month with Lonato. She shouted for her allies, and they returned her back. Everyone stay calm, all right. Professor, a faint voice from Bernadetta came from afar. I can't shoot or help you guys with this fog. It's only temporary. Billet answered, shouting back. Stuff like this takes a lot out of a mage, especially with such a large space like this. This is only here to confuse us. Don't fall for it. No reply was given, but Billette knew her answer was heard. Finally, the smoke began clearing. It was not immediate, but Billette was patient. She first looked to the lower levels of the room, where she saw Byleth and Petra looking back at her. This was strange. No enemy had come yet, so why was the spell cast? Surely none of the students had set it off, right? Turning back, she was about to announce it as a false alarm, but she saw him. The very man himself. The one in all those rumors of the Reaper, and the one that she thought was the fakest of all when Flame had warned her of him. Studded in fully black armor, and large in stature, he wore an eerie mask to accompany his get-up. His large scythe had raised itself with his body, and he was staring down at Linhard, who had been frozen in terror, watching his menacing aura. She did it out of instinct. No one but her or Linhard had seen him yet, but she sent a cry as she leaped forward. The scythe swung itself downwards. As it hurtled towards Linhard, Billette grabbed him, pushing him back. She knew her body would not be able to move fast enough. She swerved beside her student, hugging him quickly, making sure not to let him see the carnage. A scream was heard, and suddenly everyone was alerted. Blood landed itself around the two. As Linhard finally opened his eyes to register what was happening, she hushed him, desperately. "Don't look, don't look, don't look, don't look," Billette repeated. Her mind was going astray, but she continued repeating her command to Linhard. "Don't look, don't look, don't look. Linhard. Don't look." She finally felt herself losing consciousness. Finally slumping herself down as Linhard moved, he finally figured out her words. Blood, all over her. He felt nauseous. Her eyes were still open, but her mouth had stopped moving. Billette was dead, and already bested before the battle could even begin. Chapter 48, The Reaper's Approach. It happened far too quickly for anyone to truly realize. Linhard could only stare, eyes shaking in terror at the sight he witnessed. He was frozen in place, still trying his hardest to stay rational. That's right. Staying rational was the solution to recovering from this scenario. He tried his best to regain his composure. As the mist finally had settled, more of the middle tier had begun making a run for Billette out of concern. "Professor!" Ferdinand's voice bellowed across the hall, alerting everyone. Bernadetta and Dorothea ran down, fully knowing they were breaking their orders. Edelgard joined after them, now inspecting their teacher as she lay limp across the floor. As each of the now present students surveyed Billette, Edelgard bellowed her orders. She shouted, screaming for everyone to get away from the enemy. Dragging Linhard away, she swayed her able hand away, begging for the others to step aside. "Everyone, she's dead. Retreat and regroup. We have to make it out of this." The chaos continued to ensue. The students were hit with confusion. Unknown to them all, the spirit of a young girl had presided over Billette's beaten corpse. She looked at everyone in chaos, watching as each new pool of blood was made. The mission to protect the mausoleum had failed. Finally looking back at Billette, she could only apologize for not making it in time. "You still have that shopping trip planned. Do not give in yet," she ordered, but knew her words were not heard. Now retaining her concentration away from the chaos around her, she once more looked towards Billette. "I'll reverse this for you. This is not the future we have planned. Professor. Change your fate, with the divine pulse." An array of colors flashed around the surrounding areas. The ground shook, and all focus and sanity had been lost. As the events already past rewinded themselves backwards, Billette found herself feeling the pain pierce her once again, as her blood began reverting itself back onto her body. Her bones and skin now repaired themselves, until finally she was whole once more. It hurt her to go through these events again, but she was back where she should be, this time with Suthies beside her. The mist was back, but it would soon be cleared. Thanks, she now ran to where she knew Linhard would be, refusing to contemplate what had just happened. "Thank me later, you fool," Suthies said, now finding it hard to breathe. "My powers take a lot out of me, still. I cannot support you for long." She did not need to. Billette grappled onto Linhard, pushing him aside. She knew she was not quick enough to withstand a full attack, so she shouted instead. "Heal me, Linhard. The command was direct, but had caught him off guard. Still, the urgency in her voice alerted him. The mist finally cleared, and as the black figure revealed itself, the scythe was swung at blistering speeds. Belette unleashed her sword, and a clang erupted through the room, now alerting everyone. Another swing was made by the Death Knight, and as Belette tried to move back, the very tips and ends of the scythe had grazed her cheek. It stung. She looked around, seeing Linhard now safe, but scared. "Professor," he called, worried. "It's okay," she reassured, trying her best to think of the next course of action. This enemy was far stronger than all of the students combined, and she was not willing to let him harm any of the class just yet. "I want you to get away from here. A warp spell can only be used so many times before the user feels fatigued. Chances are, our enemy right now is just a distraction. Get away. Run to the front, and tell brother what's to come." Now, she turned to the enemy, looking past him to see the rear group atop the stairs. "Edelgard, trust in me and run through here with Linhard. Don't you dare turn around. I want everyone else to stay where they are, including Casper and Ferdinand. Don't you two dare move away from your posts." Casper was the first to shout back against what he was told. "Professor, no. We can't do this. This is not the correct way out of this," Ferdinand agreed. "We can help you. Please, let us fight. Stay put." Belletta's voice bellowed. She knew they needed to fight the enemy at some point, but she would not wish the alleged Reaper against even her worst enemy. "If not for you, do it for me. I want you both to keep an eye on the sides. Please." Her voice was desperate, but it rang loud. As much as it pained them not to do anything, Ferdinand and Casper gritted their teeth in acceptance. From above, Edelgard nodded, now sprinting around Belette and the Death Knight, hoping with all her might that he would not intercept her on her way down. Finally looking towards the Death Knight, Belette eyed his villainous mask with fearful determination. "Keep your eyes on me," she swung her sword again, but it was countered and deflected. "Don't you dare harm them. I'll kill you if you do." Each swing she gave was always countered, but she persisted. Her constant swings and clashes still continued being deflected, but she still continued, knowing she was weak against her enemy. Finally stopping from breathlessness, she now looked at her enemy. She stood, still unflinching, and more ready than ever to battle. "Do not worry. Your students will be spared." As she inspected Belette, he looked towards the hand wielding his scythe. "You're greatly invigorating. I can hardly kill everyone else when I have you to myself. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity." "I try," Belette attempted to jest, trying her hardest to regain her composure. As she spoke, a symbol of the crest of flames appeared in front of her. Somewhere, and somehow, she must have hit the Death Knight. Her wound from before had healed itself. Ignoring this, her eyes were only locked on her enemy. She knew nothing of where the students were, or how her brother was handling the situation, but she also knew they could take care of themselves. "Keep trying." As he said this, Belette felt a quiver cross her arms out of fear. His voice was dry, with no fleeting emotions escaping it. Still, it was abundantly clear to Belette he was enjoying this. His choice of words, his actions in playing around with Belette, and the time he spent surveying her, those qualities told her everything she needed to know that this was no usual enemy. "I want to see you trying to withstand me. Please do it to the best of your ability." He ran, faster than before, as if all the weight holding him down from his armor was non-existent. A swing was made at Belette, and she felt a tear made from her shoulder. It was not the one of her dominant hand, so she tried her best to withstand the sting she felt when pierced. Next, he swung once more. It grazed her side, still making a mild cut that she could just barely ignore. It took everything she had to dodge this swing. Finally, he gave no time for his third swing. He lurched towards her, swinging his scythe upwards, making a clean upper wound through her stomach, finally knocking Belletta's breastplate off from her, but still not going through her heart. Despite this, blood had now begun gushing outwards from her stomach, slowly leaking onto her thighs. Finally allowing herself to breathe again, she tried her best to regain composure. Inspecting the blood leaking from her stomach at first, she knelt down, now unable to move as completely as she could before. The Death Knight still had more time to play with her, and he was far from finished. As blood slowly trickled out, Belette felt herself feeling nauseous. This was no normal wound. You've been poisoned. Sothis now gravitated herself to Belette in a state of urgency. Having finally regained some of her strength, she readied herself, but was stopped by Belette. I can't have you going out on us yet, Sothis, I need you to dash, she screamed as her wound continued infecting her with pain. I need you to use your power for the students. What of you? She said, now annoyed. What of your well-being? You won't kill me, Belette said to the Death Knight. He could only stare back at her, still not giving a response. You're a hired hand, aren't you? Why else would you toy with me if you were hired to get a job done? You're here to kill time. I can tell. He gave her a cold stare filled with venom. Unmoving, he responded, correct. I am merely doing as I wish with this battle. So you won't kill me? No. You see, Sothis. Belette felt herself losing consciousness. Still, with all her might, she smiled. I'll be all right, so don't waste your energy for the likes of me. The students matter far more than I do. That's dash. At this point, she began wheezing, now unable to properly breathe from the loss of blood. She coughed some of it outwards, but still tried to regain herself with all that she could. It's the deal I made with Seath. I need them alive. I need them to, live. Her vision was hazy. Sothis attempted to call out to the stunned professor, however it was of little use. Regardless, Belette tried to carry her sword. Her arms stung. She was unable to move. She could feel him, though. The Death Knight approached her, inspecting her. He felt his long breaths caressing past her shoulder. Those are fatal wounds, he recounted, but she could not yet reply. It took all she could to manage it, but Belette wanted to swing her sword. She did. The pain from her soreness caused her scream to intensify. She felt her body collapsing on itself through the power of one swing, as her breaths began to lessen. It landed atop the right knee of the Death Knight's armor, however the strike was too weak to do anything against it. He looked at it, then looked at Belette. Her face was still serious. She continued wheezing, whilst maintaining her serious expression. You are finished? Stop fighting, the Death Knight reported. Following as he had said, Belette finally closed her eyes. She felt herself slump her head to the ground, now closing her eyes. Shouts from Sothis erupted her hearing now. They were muffles, but it was all she could recognize from the battle. I need to save you. Sothis cried, but Belette did not respond. She decided actions spoke louder. For her first move, she smiled. This only agitated the girl even further. You fool. The poison hurt. It hurt her badly. It was the most pain Belette had ever experienced in her life. It was far more brutal than the killing blow she had reverted before. It hurt so much, but she so desperately wanted for it to stay. The Death Knight was far more powerful than she had ever anticipated anyone of being. If she satiated his bloodlust just from doing all this, then she knew in the long run that it would be beneficial. That was a plan she felt comfortable with, and it was one she felt her brother could make sense of. Sothis ran to her, now eyeing the Death Knight with venom. He stood still. Finally looking away from the battle, he saw the higher floor, where Bernadetta and Dorothea had been watching in horror. They had listened to their leader's order, trying as much as they could to not move an inch. From his left, he noticed Casper running at him. You bastard! The Death Knight dodged him, putting away his scythe, but punching Casper, sending him flying from whence he came from. He walked now. He did not go up, but down. He went back down the stairs, ignoring Belette, Casper, and Ferdinand. His time was finished. An enemy mage ran past him, but stopped when noticing the Death Knight retreating. Hey, you still have a job to do. He blared, annoyed. I am done, he responded. I took out a powerful pawn of theirs. My bloodlust has been satiated. And so the Death Knight continued walking downwards. As he went back, Edelgard had noticed him, and so had Petra. They swung, but he dodged. He opened the door to the holy mausoleum, before finally turning back, where he saw Byleth. "So you are the brother." He gave another piercing stare. "Your sister will die if she does not get treatment. I am hoping you can be the one entertaining me next time, but I can still settle for either of you, still. Make sure she lives to fight me again. I have not had a fight with someone such as her before. She withstood me well." He now left, leaving Byleth. As he vanished, more enemies had invaded the hall. Regardless of the enemy onslaught that was approaching them, Byleth turned to face Linhard, who had been tucked away from the corner to heal the frontal group as they fought. "Save my sister!" His voice rang loud, whilst his gaze was fixated on the enemy. Linhard was still frozen from the sight of blood, but this time, Edelgard was the one to wake him from his fear. She downed the barbarian beside her, running to Linhard, before finally engaging him. After sending a palm across his face, she looked at him with a glare worth cutting the hardest of materials. "Last I checked, you were a certified monk now, so don't let our professor die." Finally, Linhard snapped away from his trance. He forgot his fear of blood for a moment, only to look at Edelgard. Just a few days ago, they had found themselves in an argument, but she had ignored all of this just for this very moment. "Save her. Don't battle, and don't think. Just bring our professor back to us." He was still shaking. Looking at his hands, he noticed the green glow they were emitting to heal his allies while he was put in his trance. They were hands capable of saving his professor, and they were the hands both Byleth and Edelgard had wanted most from him. He tried to move more now. Nodding his head, he silently ran up through the stairs, wanting to help one of the few people in the academy who never put down his interests. He continued, running, wanting to save Byleth. It was not out of duty, but out of desire. Never again did Linhard want to face another battle. Never again did he ever want to go through all of this, but he knew he would do it anyway. He had to, for his own interests, and for everyone else's. As he ran upwards, Edelgard finally looked to Byleth. She had previously ran upwards to notify everyone of the fog before running back to her original post. Finally, having regained her breath, she found herself and Petra battling a horde of enemies before them. Dodging a fire spell cast towards her, she deflected the next one before finally slaying her enemy. "What happened to cause all this?" she asked Byleth, still needing her recap. "We thinned our lineup in the hopes of remaining formidable, but they responded by competing with us in numbers." As Byleth explained this, he too had found himself slaying each enemy that came past them. "Our forces are currently in disarray, but we can still counter. We have to." Byleth noticed as he was speaking, that occasionally time would revert itself backwards before he found himself executing the same swings again. Whilst initially disorienting, he could hear Suthi's voice from afar. Some of the students seemed to be having some difficulties with their efforts. "I am making the adjustments required to get us through this, but my powers are waning. Can they continue holding on?" he asked. "Yes, they are making a few errors, but the mistakes are few and far between. I can conserve enough energy to prevent mistakes, whilst giving a few of them visions to help prevent their errors, but I will not last long, lest we end this battle early." At this point, Edelgard found herself running to Byleth. She was scared, but just like all the times before, she did not show it. Looking up at her most trusted professor, she gave him a look of ambition and readiness. "This is your call, Professor," she said. "What are your orders?" They were far from finished, the battle was far from over, and the students were far from ready to give up just yet. Chapter 49, A Desperate Counterattack. Suthi's was trying her hardest to keep everyone alive. The students were trained. They were leagues above the other classes, but they would never be perfect. For all those months they had readily engraved Byleth's teaching onto their minds, they could not account for the lifetime's worth of teachings that their enemy must have had. Even still, Suthi's was near Byleth, and she too was near Byleth. The two acted as her middle ground, and so she could wander around the mausoleum freely because of it. She had learned from her year's worth of trial and error with Byleth about how to keep giving visions. Before, she used to show Byleth the very past of Fodlands. She showed him a time of war, and a time of raging chaos. Now, she could do the very opposite. She managed it just a little during the battle with Lonato, but she could relay her memories onto others, just as she could with the siblings to catch them up on the situation. When a student was felled, she rewinded time, then implanted their prior mistake onto them before their moment's end. She first saved Casper, then did the same for Dorothea, eventually managing it even for Linhard as he ran towards Billette to heal her. Switching which student to save was taxing. She floated endlessly, surveying the ground from above to see who was in need of her assistance. Afterwards, she hoped they would forget this strange occurrence and chalk it down to luck. Byleth was in grouping them together. Anytime she heard a scream or plea for help, she knew it was her time. Still, over time she could feel her powers weakening, and she too had felt herself breathing out of exhaustion from her efforts. Still, the students were learning. They were under a form of pressure that no classroom could teach them, and none of them were taking it for granted on this day. What began as a few flimsy mistakes had evolved into an onslaught of mitigations and evolutions to prevent their prior errors. Eventually, they were even capable of looking out for themselves, alongside their friends. When the mist had first entered the room, Byleth had dispelled the mage almost immediately, but it had given enough time for the enemy to scour out and invade. They used him as a sacrificial pawn, and he accepted that fate with evil-eyed readiness. It was how they managed to sneak in. Amongst the crowds before them, they had disguised the already thinned-out security with layers of fog, and little by little, the enemy had taken a step into the hall in waves to surprise the class. It had worked, and almost immediately, everyone had found themselves in a confused state of combat, whilst the few of the remaining enemies had taken it as their duty to run upwards through the hall as the frontal arrangement was distracted. They were after not just everything, but something. Suthies could not figure out what they wanted. The few that were running upwards had to face the rapid-fire arrows raining from below, thanks to Bernadetta. Hiding behind the various pillars, they used a few of the tombs to slide around, trying their best to hide from the eyes that prayed for them. Bernadetta was quick to notice. She turned to Hubert, shouting, I need you to do me a favor. I'm listening. His miasma balls were able to land upon the enemy, however the faraway range had made it difficult for him to properly dispel all of the opposing forces. At 40 o'clock below, look to the second row upwards. I may be wrong. She avoided a ball of fire, to which she quickly countered rapidly with another bow from her quiver. The crest of Varley's hologram emanated off of her as she reacted, but she was quick to ignore it. But someone's trying to sneak up here from the sides. I can't move from here, and they're hiding behind everything else way too quickly. Please, can you help me? At this, Dorothea joined. I can go down with him, but Bern, will you be alright here? My crest, she explained. You might remember me using it back at the Red Canyon, and even if it works against me sometimes, it has its uses. When I need it to, sometimes my body moves for a brief moment way quicker than it needs to be. It used to be a curse, but Father always told me it would be better on the battlefield than in the kitchen. Dorothea wanted to question the morbid implications of Bernadetta's crest's involvement with her father, but she let it be. Looking to Hubert, who gave a steady nod, she turned back to her friend. I won't lose you, Bern. Stay safe. I'm a good shot, you know. Alas. She's not wrong, Hubert said, having taken his time during this exchange to confirm Bernadetta's observations. And she was not only right, but also very much leading onto the bigger picture. I will take the left side as Bernadetta told me to, but Dorothea, I want you to take the left. You're telling me there's more? Far more than anticipated. Once you can deal with a good amount, we will regroup on our way down. We are far too weak to handle this attack, so getting Professor Byleth to help us is our only viable option. Looking down once more, Dorothea saw Linhard steadily trying his best to heal Billette. She turned to Hubert, facing him with steady determination. I want to take Professor Billette down with us. We're not enough for her, but having actual professional medical help might be good. She's been poisoned, but I know Manuela personally, and she's the best person I know right now that can help us. You're suggesting a retreat as we make our way down for communication? Yes, I am. Have it your way, Hubert acknowledged. I will help you carry her, but we need someone to assist us in guarding our hides till we can reach the exit. Ferdinand, Bernadetta shouted, to which the lanced wielder immediately disposed of a foe before turning to face upwards from the middle section. "Can you guard Dorothea and Ferdinand? We want to get the professor to safety." In this moment of urgency, Bernadetta had lost all hesitation in the hope of successfully concluding the mission. This behavior took him by surprise, but Ferdinand still readily responded. "I will do what I can." Bernadetta nodded, before turning to her friend. "Look, I know you don't like him, but dash. I know," she said. "I want to save the professor, too. I don't believe in her dream like you do, but she can't go out like this." "All right, we have our plan, then." Both Dorothea and Hubert nodded. After readying themselves, they ran downwards from opposing ends. Bernadetta continued stationing herself in the middle, shooting as many arrows as she could. She was close to running low, and knowing that she would need to make a move soon to retrieve her ammo, she had to hope that her friends could clear a path for her before she found herself in danger. Linhard, who had finally done all he could to heal Billet, turned to Ferdinand. "I still have my dark tomes with me. I can try and hold the fort when you leave." "That is suitable. How is her situation?" "I managed to close up some of her wounds, but she's still in critical condition. I'm not an expert on everything, but I gather her crest has been healing her bigger wounds for us as well. She'll last if we can get her out of here." "Is she unconscious?" Ferdinand said, dodging an arrow from Bernadetta's which downed a soldier from afar. "Far from conscious, but breathing all the same." From their sides, screams and grunts could be heard. Finally appearing, Dorothea and Hubert had successfully managed to prevent the oncoming ambush from their ends. Looking at Linhard, they noticed he had calmed down for the moment, but was still making an effort not to fully reveal himself to Biletta's wounds. Making an effort to pick her up, Dorothea initially stumbled, but Hubert properly guided her on where to position their hands. "This sort of stuff becomes very useful when disposing of unwanted evidence," he informed her. "You'd do well to remember it, as I once did." From afar, Caspar spoke, out of breath from his constant fighting. "I won't even question how you got that tidbit of advice. Just get out of here. Me and old Linhard can take it from here." "Thanks," Dorothea said. "I know Edie and the professor are down below. We'll get them up here as soon as we can." "We will also need to find an opening to leave," Ferdinand reminded the two. "I will try my best to lead the way, so I want you two only to focus on our current plans. The exit to the mausoleum could still be in the midst of summoning reinforcements down below." "Sounds about right," Dorothea agreed. "Just once, you being a bee might be useful, after all." He ignored that final comment. Finally grasping Billet properly, Hubert and Dorothea had hunched her arms just above their heads, making it easier to move in the process. As they ventured forth, Ferdinand had moved forward, keeping his eyes ahead for any signs of danger. In this particular battle, there were a myriad of enemy mages. Of course, the enemy knew they would be in a large room against a huddle of students. Sending ranged fighters must have been their primary strategy in forcing themselves inside the hall. He was not the best at it, but Ferdinand was slowly getting a hand in deflecting any balls of fire that came their way. At some point, beams of light were crossing past the group. First it came from behind, then in front, and now it was above them. The mages were getting better at aiming, and as they crossed the last set of stairs, they were now being attacked from below. Ferdinand ran behind the trio, now prioritizing the rear of the group's defenses. Hubert did not look back, however had noticed the confusion on his allies' faces. "It's an Nosferatu spell. It won't do much in regards to damage, but it heals the user on enemy impact. We cannot let it hit the professor in the state she is in." "But we have no way to dodge it," Dorothea pointed out. Rather than responding, Ferdinand stood in front of her, before a light had flashed before the group. Having been hit briefly, he groaned, before kneeling down in weakness. Dorothea watched in horror, but was stopped before she could check on him. "Not long now," he recounted. "Dorothea, I need to apologize. It was my sworn duty to do you proud and escort you outside, but I may be unable at this rate. I will tackle those firing spells at us, but I trust you to make your escape." She wanted to tell him not to do so. She also wanted to tell him his actions were selfish, and that they were not working in wooing her. How she responded was by a nod. Everyone before them was making an effort to escort the professor, and so she did not want to drag morale down. As Ferdinand rushed back up, a new visitor came from the stairs. Thankfully, it was not an enemy. "I'm sorry I couldn't join you all in time," Edelgard said, both dismayed and fatigued. "Me and the professor have managed to clean out the distractors from below, but too many escaped our view." She was shocked upon viewing Billet, but kept her calmness still present. "Hubert, are you attempting a retreat?" "I will rejoin as swiftly as possible, Your Highness. We simply need to conduct expert first aid, and Dorothea had informed us that Manuela was the person for that. I will commend you for setting your grievances aside. Professor Byleth will join the battle ahead soon. We are getting an idea of their motives, so I will move on ahead. Stay safe, you two." Edelgard now continued running upwards. As Dorothea and Ferdinand continued, they saw Byleth and Petra below. They had now cleaned up the battle. Making sure they could successfully escape, Petra accompanied them. Looking around at the corpses of enemy soldiers, the escorting students could only stay shocked. They had ambushed them, having already formed a strategy, and they did it with such readiness to throw away their lives. All that lay in the end was a pile of bodies that would soon be disposed of. Ultimately, this was the impact that Lonato's letter had on everyone, and the consequences were severe. Finally reaching the exit, they opened the door. The sunlight from outside startled the two, but they trudged onwards. The battle was far off now. Their focus was still the same, however. As they continued walking, Dorothea thought about everything they saw. Hubert noticed, now finally giving himself time to think as well. They finally reached outside. So many crowds had been hurtling themselves around the stalls of the campus. With each glance given to them, people made way, awkwardly, as they escorted Billet to where she needed to go. Pretty soon, rumors would surface of the common folks' worries, but this did not matter to them. "Let them stare," said Hubert. "I am sure you had many accidents such as this on your days of opera. This should come as no surprise to you." "Yeah." Before letting him continue, Dorothea now looked at Hubert, confused. "Usually people assume the opera is a life of glitz and glamour. What makes you think I'm used to this?" "It is always the most elaborate of settings that the darkest of secrets lie," he answered, having already known his answer. "You cannot deny that you most likely witnessed many unfortunate happenings from where you came from. I have even noticed you carrying that knife on your person, most likely a fragment of a habit from your time of acting." She felt a shiver cross her body. It was true, though, on her waist was a sheathed knife that Dorothea often hid from everyone, and it was what granted her many moments of safety in her earlier years. "And what if it was?" Dorothea said, showing hostility, but Hubert could only snicker for a moment. "Manuela will need a lot of explaining. I trust you to catch her up to speed." He had changed the conversation around. Dorothea went along with his ploy, feeling her focus at the moment should have been put to use elsewhere. "Don't worry. I know she'll help us." The two continued, now searching the underground halls for the infirmary. Elsewhere, back in the Holy Mausoleum, much would happen far from prying eyes. Having now finally caught up to his students, he could see the fatigue beginning to wear down Caspar and Ferdinand. They had spent their majority of time fighting defensively, whilst Linhard had done his best from the sides to provide suitable healing. Byleth inspected them quickly, before turning to Edelgard beside him. Unknown to the students, Suthies had finally returned to her original host, feeling famished beyond comprehension. "The rest is up to you. I can no longer see myself being of use." Thanking her, Byleth now looked to his group of students. Any more mistakes they endured in this battle would now be irreversible. He needed to keep his focus honed, and his worries set aside. "How many escaped upstairs?" Edelgard asked, to which Ferdinand responded. "Just one, but I am sure you can catch them." Linhard had suggested otherwise from shaking of his head. In dismay, he faced Edelgard. "Unfortunately, that simply isn't the case. I'd hazard a guess that the lone enemy mage we let past has experience with using warp spells. They'll take what they need, and then run to places unknown to us. In the end, we might have lost the battle if we let even one of the enemy ranks ahead. What makes you think that? Byleth asked, however he had already known his answer. The darkly clad warrior that beat down Professor Billet had been warped here as well, I'm sure of it. It takes a lot of strength to use such a spell, and doing it again in such a short interval of time is downright suicidal, but after witnessing today, I'm sure that's what the enemy knew beforehand. They don't care for their own well-being. Damn it! Casper pounced his fists to the ground, frustrated. He screamed. After a moment of realization, everyone turned to him. By this point, he was too tired to fight any longer, but he had just enough willpower to vent his frustrations. First the battle last month, and now this. I swear these mages have a thing for risky moves. They're just dragging the innocents down with them. Think of all the people that were involved this month. Just for what? A stupid letter. He looked to Edelgard now, eyeing her with a deathly look. Edelgard, Professor, I don't care if I'm down for the count. We need to restrain that bastard. They'll get just about anyone involved in their schemes if we let them continue. This needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. You're right. We've suffered that firsthand this month. Edelgard agreed. Professor, would you allow me to proceed with you? Bernadetta is up ahead, and I am sure she is doing a remarkable job holding out for us, but that can only be done for so long. As Byleth nodded, a sigh was given from Linhard. Permit me to ask that I join as well. I'd rather you not forget me. This surprised everyone. Turning to him, Edelgard did a poor job of hiding her shock. Let's call it a favor for Casper. I'm also sure Bernadetta will need first aid as soon as she can get it, and Dorothea won't be too happy if I let her friend get hurt without my assistance. You may be right, Byleth acknowledged. You may come. Edelgard, can you cooperate? Of course. As Linhard joined himself beside her, she tried her best not to look at him. We'll be working together once more, it seems. Teach me how to take a proper rest once we're finished, Linhard. Joke all you want, but that's actually one of my specialties. Closing up one of her wounds, Linhard smiled for the first time in the battle. Byleth did not talk. Instead, signaling for his new allies to follow after him, the trio ran towards the stairs. It was still a considerable height upwards, but the time they spent traveling had given time for Byleth to think of all that had taken place. The enemy knew what to do, and they were never after the Archbishop, nor all of the sacred valuables in the hall they were stationed within. They were after one thing and one thing only, and it must have been so valuable that countless soldiers were willing to die for it. Seath had never informed them of what exactly lay in the hall, but this did not mean Byleth was completely unaware. He finally deduced that the enemy must have known the location of their desired valuable, and it was unfortunately within the farthest reaches of the room. Bernadetta was the only one who was now stationed there, but he trusted she could fend for herself. Just for now, she had to stall for time. The mage who had been in charge of warping the Death Knight and summoning the mist was the head of the operation. After all was said and done, he had focused himself towards sneaking through and weaving past enemy lines as the chaos ensued. He selected only his most faithful of followers and finest of warriors. Now, they were all dead. None had dared retreat, for they believed they were truly doing what they could for their cause. This was all the mage could truly ask for. Bernadetta was still shooting downwards as he snuck past her left side. She had noticed the mage, and quickly begged for her crest to finish her current task before focusing on him. Meanwhile, the mage also knew of her presence, but he ignored her. It wouldn't be right to aggravate her right now, especially when he was in such a torn state. Focusing elsewhere, the mage finally found what he was looking for. There, in the farthest reach of the room, and in the deepest part of it all, was a boxed weapon. Unsheathing it, he grabbed what was inside. A sword, one of a hard and strong nature, with deep razored edges and curved handles that looped twice on each side. The hard, unknown material had been tattered in grime, but it was still usable. As he picked it up, the sword glowed an orange flare. This was it. It was the weapon he was looking for, the sword of the Creator. When finishing what he had accomplished, the mage knew his next cast spell would be his last. It did not matter. Once he warped outside, he would find himself a way to safely pass on, whilst his allies could take charge on their next move. Readying himself to retreat, a blue glow surrounded him. Before it could envelope and send him off, an arrow flew to his side. Bernadetta had finally taken notice. To the mage, she was just a student. She had a meek figure, and a scared, yet also determined expression. He could take her on, and he could do it easily. Swinging the sword, it extended itself, lashing outwards, and reaching towards unprecedented lengths. Even from afar, Bernadetta felt herself struggling to dodge. A single slice had stroked her thigh as she tried to escape. She was unable to move, and she screamed as she tumbled. She had to ignore the blood that was slowly leaking out of her. Belette was in far more pain than her, and she still had so many plans for the class. Bernadetta knew he was the one. He was the one who warped the Death Knight into the hall, and he was also the one who dared to escape from her. She felt vengeful, completely letting all pain and hesitation escape her. Readying her bow after picking up a fallen arrow, she eyed the mage. Firing it towards him, he once again dodged. She would not let him escape peacefully, and the mage knew that. Before she could pick up another arrow, the mage swung the sword again. It elongated itself, this time crossing Bernadetta's shoulder. His aim was off, but as she screamed and began covering her wound with her other able hand, he knew she would be a threat no longer, right? No, he had to be sure. His allies were still distracting everyone below. He had enough time. He did not bother to swing the divine sword again. He had to be thorough with her. Her crest made her gifted, and this meant that the girl would be a threat if kept alive. For all he knew, his allies would face this girl again in the future. Walking up to her, Bernadetta took notice. Her eyes widened in fear. All of her prior confidence had vanished from before. She tried to crawl away, but moving her legs was a tall task with her injured left thigh. The mage continued, catching up to her. He tugged on her hair, and Bernadetta winced, closing her eyes in pain. So this was what she sounded like? Admittedly, it felt good to finally hear her in pain. "You've had your last bout," the mage cried out. "I'll just get rid of you. Your class will be too distracted by your corpse to pursue me. You could have just let me warp, but you had to play a hero. I hope you die realizing this was your own doing." She muscled through the cut on her arm, grabbing the arm of the mage with her own. She knew she was far weaker, but she wanted her last word. "You got him in here. You're the reason our professor got hurt. What if I am?" He shot back, relentlessly. She knew her response would elicit anger, but she wanted to continue it. Gritting her teeth, she screamed an ugly scream that now hallowed out across the hall. "I'm sick of being tormented by people like you. You're all monsters that I'll never forgive for as long as you continue hurting those I love." The mage took a moment to finally register her words. His only response was of malice. "Monsters with a noble purpose, you bitch." The mage began twisting her hair further upwards, before finally realizing all reasoning with her would be useless. "Get out, and stay out." The moment he said his final parting, he readied his legs, kicking Bernadetta away. She landed near the highest stair, and only continued hurtling downwards, feeling pain with every tumble. It was excruciating when placed with the bleeding of her wounds, but for a moment, she felt bliss. She was happy to have defended her professor for a moment, even if it might have cost her life. Before she could take in more of her spiraling injuries, she was caught quarter way through the stairs by Linhard. He knelt down, remembering his interactions with Dorothea this past month. Looking towards his allies, he signaled for them to go on ahead. They nodded, before rushing forward. "I'm sorry," Bernadetta whimpered. "I know you can't look." She turned her head, now facing Linhard, who was steadily holding her up. "You can't look at blood." "I can't, and you're wholeheartedly correct about that, but I also won't be able to look at Dorothea again if I let you die here, so do me a favor and don't talk. You did a fine job distracting him, but you've also still got a myriad of paintings for me to judge after we're done here today." "You're heartless," Bernadetta joked, chuckling to herself. "Thank you." Bernadetta had managed to stall for just enough time. Byleth and Edelgard approached him. He sent a ball of fire towards their direction, however Edelgard quickly countered it. She knew he was weakened. Bernadetta had done enough to him that he would need time before casting another spell to conduct his escape. "My teacher, I want you to finish him." Some venom had crossed through her voice, and finally, she let it escape her, no longer holding it back. She felt fear, anger, and so much more throughout this entire battle. For once, she wanted to let it all out. "They've done everything we never asked for, and made this fight a living hell. For everyone who fell, and for the blue skies we wish to all see again, please end this fight for me. That's an order from the future emperor." Byleth looked at her. Her scream was desperate, but it did not go unheard. He nodded. "Your desire is my motivation," he shouted. "This ends here." He began running towards the mage. Waving the sword of the creator out of fear, the mage swung, but Byleth dodged. Still, the ancient sword had clashed with Byleth's weapon, knocking it out of commission. Byleth ignored his now swordless position, focusing only on the mage. Running at blistering speeds, he rammed himself into the pressured enemy, dropping his weapon. Picking the glowing sword up for himself, Byleth once again built up speed to dispatch the enemy mage. In his final moments, the mage saw it. His cold, dead, heartless eyes. They did not shine, and they did not flicker. As he felt his chest being pierced by the one artifact he and his group had always wanted, his final few memories would be of him looking at his own blood splash onto Byleth's clothes. He was still unflinching, even after all the blood shed. As a speckle of red crossed his right cheek, the mage noticed the unnerved face of the professor. He was nothing like his sister. He killed him, with no hesitation shown. As the mage screamed, Byleth ignored this. Edelgard caught up to him, now looking at the mysterious sword in his hand. She was relieved, but also worried. Looking at the mess now before them, she sighed. "There's a lot to clean up after all of this, and so much pain to be felt," she said, wistfully. "The battle ended, but Professor, I feel we may have lost more than we wanted in its passing." "Sister has been gravely injured," Byleth recounted, also noting down Suthi's no longer able to use her abilities in his head. "And so too had Bernadetta been wounded far more than she would have wanted. I am sure that everyone is fatigued as well. We have suffered a lot today." Finally, the chaos was over. Walking back down the stairs, Byleth took the sword with him. He needed to show it to Rhea, after all. Thinking of all that had happened today, even he felt fatigued. The day still had far more to offer, but he was sure that every member of the Black Eagles were unwilling to savor it after all that had taken place. Chapter 50, No Rest for Mercs. As was the case with Shay during the festival, taking in the alluring smells of the food had caused her stomach to rumble when patrolling the grounds with Geralt. Out of kindness, he had bought her one of the many delicacies, being a piece of meat on a stick. Shay munched on it happily. "Money's tight, I take it?" he asked, as the pair continued patrolling the grounds. "I know how us mercs work. Sometimes we can't make heads or tails when it comes to savings." "You're right about that." As they now were nearing the academy grounds, Shay stopped for a moment. "Say, nobody's allowed through here, right? It's been customary for this place to be open only during the Rite of Rebirth festival, but some areas are still strictly forbidden, of course." Taking a bite from her food, Shay looked around her. Not one person had seemed amiss, and it had also seemed as if the atmosphere was too normal when compared to the letter Geralt had received. "I have an idea." She faced Geralt. "I think we should split up on this occasion." Her comrade gave her a question look before continuing. "No, I'm not here to steal your food and run. I think if anything bad's gonna be happening today, it would be somewhere far off view. How's about I take the alleyways through the near entrance, and you do the usual campus? You're a big guy. It might be more efficient if I squeeze right through the town's hidden paths and alleyways over you." A sign of worry crossed his face. Geralt, as always, put his hands on his forehead, but then looked on at Shay. "I gotta ask something, kid." "Go ahead. What kinda merc are you?" The question caught Shay by surprise. For a moment, she had thought her secret somehow got out. "What do you mean?" "You're in my line of work, so I think you should know best. There are those that see it as a way to get by, and some that make a mess of things when the going gets tough. The worst ones are those that abuse the names of our job, and we can rarely come across the best of the best when it counts. Out of those groups, which one are you? Shay took a moment to reflect on the question. When looking at Geralt, she then thought of all that she had gone through, then remembered Arvel. It did not take long, for she had found her answer already. I just want to get the job done and make my clients happy. It all comes at a cost, and I may not always get a roof over my head, or food on my lap, but seeing and helping people in need is what'll get me by. That's what I think, anyway. As she said this, Geralt breathed a sigh of relief. You gave that question some genuine thought. It was my client asking, so I had to, she responded, now finishing up her last piece of meat from the stick. And thanks for treating me. I'll make sure to help you out in full. I trust you enough to do that. Looking at the monastery before them, he gave his final orders to Shay. Give it roughly 15 minutes, and I'll regroup to check how you're doing. Sounds like a plan. The two ran off, focused only on their current objective. Thankfully, Shay's slim stature had meant that squeezing through the narrow alley of the nearby town was an easier task than she would have originally imagined. Not so thankfully, these conditions were not enough to stop Arvel from emerging to point jabs at his vessel. Do you not see what's happening? You're helping our enemy. My enemy's the Ashen Demon. Pops can sit a while before I even think to go at him. He's an associate of the demon. That's no different. You don't get it, do you? People are in danger here. Shay glared at Arvel at this point. As she intended, he shuddered for a moment at seeing her fierce gaze. Before returning to her usual self, she sighed. Look, let's just get this done, and then we'll camp out for a bit before we face the demon themselves. Sound good? I suppose that works. Sorry, partner. Before Shay could reply, a cackle alerted the two. It came from the darker paths of the alley. It was far away from sunlight, but it continued nonetheless. It was not a cry for help, or a whimper or plea, but one of a maniacal manner. Looking towards the lingering abyss before them, Shay readied her sword. We found our target, she reported. Running forward without hesitation, Arvel followed, floating beside her. As they ran, he began reporting the situation they were in. From the account of our client, she's a knife wielder. Going up close will be dangerous, especially with the poison she has infused with that dagger. I think we'll need to use my power if we're gonna win against her. She might be a greater threat than we ever hoped to fight if even the Blade Breaker himself couldn't beat her. Yeah, I'm counting on you. Don't let me down. Growing impatient, Shay did exactly as her spiritual ally had suggested. In a matter of seconds, her body had disappeared, turning itself into a flashing orb of light that instantly warped to the other side of the alley. She felt her body cling itself into the air, eventually feeling the breeze as she materialized herself once again. As her body came back, Shay slid across the floor, now realizing where she was. The alley had met its dark end. She was in the perfect area for an ambush. It was but a simple square-shaped room, where the roofs and walls had perfectly aligned themselves to provide a secret holding ground. By now, the cackling should have been nearby. Shay continued eyeing her surroundings, but with how dark the room was, it was a difficult task. Now resolving to use her ears instead, she began to see if she could listen into any sign of danger. She had her years of experience already. Whether it be a laugh, a silent footstep, the rustle of clothes as they were moved, or even the gentle breeze of air that accompanied a moving figure, there were always signs that could hint to a person being somewhere. She just needed the experience to spot it. Look, I know how this game works, Shay spoke up. You want me to come in here before giving this place a good shake-up before deciding I'm hallucinating or something, and then I'll turn back around and turn tail. Unfortunately, I'm not here to play that sorta game. You're wasting your time if you want to slash through me with such an amateur ploy. Come on out. Still, no reply was given. Shay grumbled. There were times she had been given easy tasks by her employers, but occasionally, there were the few that escaped her notice. No matter the skill level. Sometimes annoyances would always rise from her job, and this was one of those moments. She already knew where the enemy was. Nodding to Arvel, she once again used a shadow flash, hurtling herself as an orb of light into the direction she was sure her target resided within. She felt herself connecting with them. As she finally materialized, a thrust was made downwards with her sword as she landed back in the air. A clash of weapons rang aloud. Shay grunted, tensing her lips as she prepared for combat. Another cackle came. Oi, oi, hey, the voice sounded. It was a feminine one. This was the person Shay was meant to be looking for. I wanted the old man. I don't want another grunt, wait, huh. A moment passed, before another laugh sounded. Heh, this wetness on my chin means you somehow got me good. Didn't see you initially, so I guess your speed was a lucky fluke. Been a while since I bled myself out. It won't be a while longer. Shay declared. How many people did you take from us? What are your plans for this festival? The innocent people here don't deserve your antics. Really now? This time, her voice had a slimy, slippery feel to it. In a matter of seconds, Shay felt a presence caress her shoulder. She screamed for a moment, tensing herself. You're not the only one who's fast, Han. Bring me the old man, and then I'll let you live. She did not want to give in yet. Once again, she used another shadow flash. Lunging herself into the nearby wall, she quickly brought herself back to life, kicking her foot against it to propel herself at Kronia once more. This time, her enemy did not see it coming. As she was pushed to the ground, Shay spent no time in letting her get back up. She lifted her up, yanking her farther from the room. Kronia struggled at first, but she slowly managed to get a hold of herself. Shay, what are you planning? Arvel shouted, worried. Another shadow flash. Now. Hurtling herself into the air, she knew Kronia would follow so long as she was in contact with her. They both transformed, zipping past the black streets. When she neared her destination, Shay used her time in materializing to grab a hold of Kronia again before she fell down free. The light towards the public streets was nearby. It meant endangering more people, but what she got in return was a good look at her opponent. She quickly grabbed the now fully formed Kronia, throwing her onto the public festival streets. Screams of surprise erupted from passers-by nearby. Shay did not care. She skidded through, stopping at her enemy to pin her to the ground. She screamed at the public around her, "Get out of here. Eat the surprisingly good food elsewhere. I've got business to settle." That's one way to tell them, Arvel muttered. That's the most you way of telling everyone they're near immediate danger. You couldn't have phrased that better, at least. And you. Shay began to reveal her next card in play. Materializing a second sword, she used it to further pin Kronia down. Go after any of the innocents here, and I'll do what I just did, only this time, it'll be to knock your skull onto the ground. Oh ho? A feisty one, I see. Feisty, but confident. I like you. Ignoring all that Shay had said moments prior, Kronia pushed away the flat surface of the sword, jumping away from her enemy. Clashing her dagger to Shay's sword, she dodged as the second weapon of Shay's tried to swing at her. Instead of retreating, she continued attacking. All Kronia wished for was just one simple cut from her dagger. It would be enough to render Shay useless. Just one swift poisoned strike, and she would win. Still, Shay did not consider herself one to back down. It was just a dagger she had to contend with, and a short one at that. She took care to step back when she needed to. At the slightest opening, she shadow flashed once more, but Kronia was quicker to counter her back this time. It toppled her slightly, though, and Shay quickly used this opportunity to her advantage. Rather than focusing on her weapon, Shay opted for a simple shove. Dropping her swords, she did a shortened shadow flash, pushing Kronia away. As she flew elsewhere, Shay once more hurdled herself, aiming for where Kronia would land. Unfortunately, she was once again quick to notice. Their weapons clashed, but Kronia used this opportunity to escape as she landed back down. Giving me a run for my gold. I'm impressed, but also surprised. Where'd you get those powers from? Shay stayed quiet as she spoke. Look, I'll be real honest with you, I thought you were just another merc, so you got me all tingly when you started scooting around the place. Sadly, you're an anomaly. I can disobey my superior's orders as much as I want, but even I know when to run out and think for a bit. You're giving up just like that. Shay may have now been unarmed at the moment, but she put her fists up, showing as much spunk as she could muster in the moment. I've still got a lot more where that's coming from. You're cute. I like that. She continued glaring at her opponent. Soon, heavy, but quick footsteps were heard. Gerald had returned. He only needed to see the sight beyond him before sharing the same glare as his ally. He recognized Kronia immediately. What happened to the innocent people you got involved in this? Tell me about that letter you sent. I'm sure you're the one who sent it. Rest assured, big guy. Everyone involved with me gets treated with great care. At least, that's what I've been told anyway. My folks usually treat them once I hand them over. A face of scorn crossed Gerald's face as she said this, causing a smile to appear on Kronia. Yeah, I know, it's a bit of an odd case, but that's how it goes in our industry. You're sick. You know what? I know that well enough. Tell me something I still have yet to learn. This time, it was Gerald who was ready to rush himself onto Kronia, but she was quick to dodge. Laughing to herself, she began scurrying herself away from the two combatants. Look, I'll give you my word. Don't go after me, and I won't slit someone's throat whilst dashing out. She showcased her knife, swirling it in the air as she ran. Stop right there, and don't go any further. Shay was too angry to listen. She wanted, especially after this fight, to continue after her. Screaming before she could lunge herself, a hand pressed her shoulder. It was Gerald. She looked at him with frustration. Are you serious? We have no idea if that witch is lying or not. I heard her before. She needs to report to her higher UPS, not get anyone else into her schemes. We need to prioritize the public. That's what Rhea would want. Shay gritted her teeth. She stopped moving her feet, looking forward as Kronia had now become an obscured shadow before her. She still wanted dearly to give chase, but she also knew that Gerald's word had spoken true. They watched as their enemy had escaped. You still willing to pay me for my troubles? She asked, trying her best to change topic. However, her clenched fists had still not yet stopped shaking. What's on your mind, kid? Another one of those rolls with meat inside. That woman's pissed me right off. He was not quite sure how he should take her words. Seeing as Kronia was beyond gone now, Gerald sighed. He had a lot he should be reporting when the Archbishop called for his presence, but having Shay nearby had taken those concerns away from him. Yeah, I guess I can do that. You'll be compensated soon enough if you don't take the food, though. Shay grumbled to herself. It was never the first time she had let an opponent get away, but it always stung every time. Gerald watched her go through the usual mercenary motions. He found it amusing to see it was a common trait amongst his people. Someone new approached the two. It was one of Rhea's knights. He seemed panicked. Sir, we heard there were reports of a skirmish taking place here. Are you all right? It's taken care of for now, he answered to the young knight. Let the sightseers back, I suppose. We'll still need to fortify the area just in case. Leave no area behind. Shay interrupted. The knight was caught off guard by her. Those alleyways need checking, too. Don't do a sloppy job. Lives are at stake. Initially ignoring her, the knight turned back to Gerald, but a glare from him made the message ring clear. Listen to the kid. She's saved me a batch of trouble today, and I'm sure she's onto something. Yes, sir. He gave a look to Shay. Nodding his head in newly found politeness, he once more turned back to Gerald. Sir, we also have some other, more urgent news to report. What's wrong this time? Your child, sir, one of them, anyways, the knight implied. Recognizing who he might have been speaking about, Shay's face lit up. Beside her, Arvel finally perked his mood up. They were finally going to hear news about the Ashen Demon. This was their moment. As their excitement rose, it was only lessened with the knight's next words. They were critically wounded in a battle inside the Holy Mausoleum. Manuela's taking care of them now, but they need urgent attention. I came in a hurry to let you know. At this, Shay felt breath escape her. Gerald turned to her, then back at the knight. His muscles tensed. Once more, he was being given a headache. This time, the matter at large was personal, and he would have never wanted it to befall him on a day like this. Shay was allowed to join Gerald. She did not question why her involvement was allowed. There was a time and place to think things over, and just this once, they were allowed to afford that luxury. The knights outside had managed to somehow calm the civilians who were haunted by the earlier fight, and so everything, for now, was seemingly returned to normal again. Dashing through the doors past the underground hallway, they reached the entrance for Manuela's infirmary. There, they saw two students. They were looking guiltily at the ground in defeat, hunching themselves onto the wall. You must be in her class, Gerald spoke. One of them tensed up when realizing he was the father of their professor. I want names. Who are you two? Right, my name's Dorothea, one of them said. She pointed to her colleague on the right. This is Hubert. She was too guilt-ridden to properly face him. Tilting her head on the ground, she muttered. I'm sorry, sir. We're all sorry this had to happen. No, I should thank you. As he said this, Dorothea's face froze. She slowly panned her head back up as he continued talking. Belette was always one with reckless abandon. I can already tell what she was trying to do, but it's always damn near impossible to predict. In battle, any moment spent not acting is always a matter of life or death. You both carrying my daughter away from there and all the way here might just make me greatly indebted to you both, and I want you to know that. Thank you, sir, Dorothea replied. She was not fully convinced. Her voice still sounded uncertain. So, the Ashen Demon became a professor here? Those must be her students. Arvel propped up. Shay ignored his commentary, instead wanting to converse with Dorothea herself. Chin up, she said. Dorothea was startled when Shay started speaking. Yeah, I know, I have no right walking myself in here and giving you life advice, but what I have to say might be something you need. Get some rest and clear your head. You already did good work today. I'm sorry you had to go through this. She did not reply to her. Finally taking herself away from the wall's embrace, she walked away from the situation, signaling for her peer to follow. Let's go, Hubert. I need some time alone. I suppose I will need to report this to Lady Edelgard as well, Hubert finally said. Good day to you all. Finally leaving, Gerald once more gave a stare at Shay. Anytime she had spoken out of turn, he had found she always knew exactly what it was that the other party needed to hear. Thanks, kid. It was a stroke of luck finding you today. Shay stayed silent. She looked at Gerald. His name was called out from inside the infirmary. Parting ways, he said his farewell. We'll talk later. I'd like it if you waited here for a bit. That all right? I still need to pay you, after all. Shay nodded. As he left, she took a moment to process all that had happened to herself. Gerald slowly walked away, and as he closed the door, he tried his best to muster a light smile at his hired hand. Shay tried to smile back, but was ultimately too occupied. She could not bring herself to face him. Not yet. Eventually, she found herself cracking down. Clenching her fist was not enough. She squeezed her back into the wall, tightening her grip onto her hair, eventually gritting her teeth in frustration. A wheeze came from her, as she tried to hold off from screaming. What's wrong, partner? Arvel asked. When realizing she was not herself, his face no longer became one of dumb curiosity. He sat down beside her now, finally concerned for her well-being. The old man doesn't know I came here to kill his child, she said. Her voice began escaping her as she spoke. Mindless ramblings finally arose. I came here helping the very father of my enemy, and he was none the wiser. It's so damn annoying. Still, she could not yet let go of her grip. The hell am I meant to do, Arvel? I came in here wanting so much, and all we got was the fact that the Ashen Demon themselves is already on the verge of dying. We can't even fight someone who's in critical condition, and neither do we deserve to be here. We just failed to help the guy who hired us. We're frauds. This stupid festival was another opportunity for us, but we messed up, again. I'm such a smartass, aren't I? I gave that knight orders, and that girl advice, but I couldn't even take a damn page off of my own book. I can't let this all go. It's another time we let something happen without us being able to do anything about it. Even with your powers, I'm useless. She continued venting. As much as he wanted to put a word in, Arvel continued letting her speak her mind. It's all so convoluted. I can't think. I can't be expecting payment from somebody like him. Not when everyone we want to get involved with is in a state like this. We don't deserve what we want right now. Honestly, I don't even know what to do anymore. I'm just so confused. As she finished her ramble, all that was left to do was let herself wistfully stare downwards. Shay refused to let a tear drop from her face just yet. She wanted to remain strong. It was not yet she could let her worries take hold of her. All this time, Arvel had been watching her in silence. Finally deciding what it was that he had to say, he made a suggestion. Let's come back later, then. As he said this, her face turned back up in confusion. But you wanted me to fight the Ashen Demon. I can't in good faith make you go on with this if you are not in the right state. Let's get out and rethink our steps. Guilt crossed her mind, but she quickly forgot about it. Looking to the door to the infirmary, Shay knew that she would not be saying her farewell to Geralt, and neither would she be paid for her work. Still, she was okay with it. Yeah, let's go. Thanks. No worries, partner. Finally getting herself up, she and her spirit made their way outside. As of right now, they needed to wait until the mess with the festival was cleared up. It was not any of her business, so Shay finally felt it right that she take some time to think things through. When Geralt had come inside the infirmary, there was a very concerned face from Manuela. It was not often that she and Hanneman were in tandem with each other, but today had called for their petty squabbles to be set aside. As they assisted one another in looking over Billet, Geralt had finally entered the room. She's in a horrid state of affairs, Hanneman narrated to himself. This poison is otherworldly. I need to take it to my lab for deeper analysis. Manuela, are you able to keep her steady while I am gone? As if I wouldn't, she retorted. And make it quick. Nodding to her, Hanneman scurried out of the room. Now, it was only him and Manuela. He tried to take a closer look at Biletta's wounds, but the curtain was closed off immediately. I'm afraid you wouldn't want to see the state your daughter is in. Will she make it? He asked. She has a lot of people relying on her. Manuela took some time before answering his question. She peeked inside the curtain, taking a look at Biletta's unconscious face, before looking at Geralt, her father. It's all uncertain right now. We'll need time. For now, I want you to stay here for a bit. Until I can decide how we approach this, having you on board would be a good idea. I can do that. Noticing a chair on the far end of the room, Geralt sat himself down. Before Manuela could return to her curtain call, she looked once more at Geralt. His face was filled with worry. As strong as he was holding himself together, the current situation did him no favors. We can pull her out of this, Captain, she assured him. What's the cost? Pardon. You heard me right. Geralt recounted memories of old. I've been in this business long enough. I know when someone's critically wounded, there's always a price to pay. She gave her answer some thought once more. Finally speaking, Manuela told the full naked truth. She won't be able to live her life the same again. Today marks the final day that Professor Billet could say she was fully able to help her students with everything she had. His eyes shot up. What? I can't disclose much more than that until Hanneman returns, unfortunately, but that's all I can give you. As she said this, Manuela's voice cracked a little. I'm sorry. Geralt was still. He had much more he wished to ask, and a lot more to say, but he could not find the words. He ended it there. It's all right. Thanks. Finally, Manuela returned to her work. Alone now by himself, Geralt had finally found time to ponder prior events. Cronia was no longer a concern, and neither was his report to Rhea. All that was on his mind was that of his daughter. He never truly did meet her properly for a discussion during her enrollment as professor here, but he remembered walking past the twins' class. He also recalled what Seath said. She had taken a shine to everyone here, and it was all going to go away soon. Finally realizing it, Gerald fiddled with his thumb. He wanted to talk to his children once more. He wanted to see her smile, then her reactions to her brother's bluntness. He wanted so badly to look over her once more. Still, he took it all for granted. From this day forward, Belletta's life would no longer be as easy as it used to. Check the description for the links to the author.